Hello and welcome to Until Saturday, the Athletics College Football Podcast. I am your host for today, David Ubben, here with my co-host, Sam Kahn. Our techspert does a whole lot of other stuff for us as well. Be sure to follow the podcast on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. That way new episodes will reach you. We'll come to you as soon as they're published. You don't have to seek us out. It's fine. And if you want to drop us a 5-star review, do that. And if you drop us a comment in those reviews, we'll try to use them for a future mailbag episode. So be nice. We like picking the people that are nice on there. You can also check us out Until Saturday on YouTube. Just hit subscribe so you know when new videos are published. Today, we got a lot to talk about, Sam. We're going to talk bounce back teams. You can define this in many ways, but I think the simplest way is teams that did not meet expectations last year for themselves or for the program, and teams that are due to exceed expectations this year. Maybe be quite a bit better than people think, and certainly better than last year. There's a lot of candidates. We've narrowed them down to 6 with some bonus picks. Sam, I think this is. The preseason's always interesting because you talk about these teams where there's no games being played for like 7 months, and so many of these opinions like get entrenched of like, well, this is obviously what's going to happen, and this is obviously what's going to happen. It seems like people forget, hey, the first month of the season is really unpredictable, and there's also lots of interpersonal dynamics that affect things on the field. And this is an unpredictable sport, and I think there's so much talk that people think it's predictable. This time of year where we think we kind of know how it's going to go. It never plays out like that.
I always tell coaches that I really appreciate what they do, because if my livelihood was tied to relying on 18 to 23-year-olds, I think I'd be in a really, really tough spot. So, yeah, that's the thing that fascinates me about this, because you said we get so entrenched in these narratives and thinking things are going to go one way. Well, what if the starting quarterback broke up with his girlfriend the day of the game?
It's a real thing.
That's a real thing that happens, So there's real stuff going on with these young men, and that can impact the program and impact the way a game goes. And what makes me laugh about it when it comes to smashing the narratives is we talk about this, like you said, for 6, 7, 8 months, and then on week 1 we see something, and it's like, well, throw that out. We're going to go overreact the whole other direction. But that said, hey, we've got some teams that we think are going to have a bounce back year, are going to have some better seasons this year. So I'm excited to get into it.
I'm going to kick us off. I think, speaking of interpersonal dynamics, recruiting is a tough balance, Sam, because you are convincing kids that you want to come to your program. But if you got to convince them too hard, it's a problem when you get on campus, right? And so for this reason, I'm going to point to our beloved Texas A&M Aggies. The better luck next year, I think we can probably crown them. But I think a lot was made over A&M making a lot of hay in the NIL game, and the work that their collective had done. And certainly after last season, we saw a lot of exodus. This is still a really talented roster. I think you might see somewhat of an addition by subtraction situation at Texas A&M this year. I think that can help your culture a little bit. But I think it's important to look at, I think most of us on this pod are believers in the blue chip ratio, which doesn't guarantee anything, but it gives you possibility. A&M, 4th best roster in college football. You can't go 5-7 again. That's really hard to do. And I think beyond the roster stuff, we talked about this a lot, almost every week on Football and Grits last year. I don't know how you could watch A&M and not say the offensive scheme is like the biggest issue here. Y'all are doing some pretty archaic stuff, very predictable, and that's not going to be the case with Bobby P. Sam, you're our resident techspert. Are you on board with the Aggies as a bounce back team?
Yeah, 100%. I think they are going to bounce back. The question for me is, to what degree do they bounce back? Are we talking about 8-4? Are we talking about 9-3? Are we talking about 10-2 and possibly making some noise in the SEC West? That to me is the question. I don't think it's going to. I would be stunned if they went 6-6 or 5-7 again. I just don't. I think there's too much talent for that to happen. And of course, we said that last year, but the moves that they made, in particular, adding Bobby Petrino as the offensive coordinator, adding Jim Chaney as an analyst of that offensive staff, it seems clear that even though Jimbo Fisher doesn't really want to say it out loud, that he's kind of handing over the reins, he kind of is. And I think that is going to open up a lot of possibilities and make this one of the best offenses in the country. And so there's that part. And then you've got the defense, which I think took its lumps last year. They had a lot of young defensive linemen, a lot of young players up front. And some of those guys are a little bit older. They've been around for a little bit now. And now we're in the second year of a defensive coordinator, second year of a scheme. So I think you'll see some natural improvement there. And the schedule, I think, is tough, but certainly in the early part of the season, I think it's manageable. And there's a chance for them to build some momentum early in the year. So I definitely do think they're a bounce back team. It's just a question of how good are they really? And to me, that becomes a test of Jimbo Fisher. If he's able to adapt the way that he needs to adapt, maybe this could be a 9 or 10 win team. But if it's still a lot of the same stuff, then maybe it's just an 8-4 team.
Well, I know everybody wants to go, funny, haha, Jimbo and Bobby, it's going to be a cage match every coach's meeting. And I'm sure there'll be some tension, but at the end of the day, it's results business. They're both very invested. If they have a huge year, I think Bobby Petrino knows in the back of his mind, I know he would never leave for a better job. He just is not that guy. But he's on the path to you could be a Power 5 head coach again. If you blow up here in the good way, that's the thing. And you look around, those two good players, Connor Wegman, Anaya Smith back, Evan Stewart, obviously you add Ruben Owens to the mix. Most importantly, you get 4 offensive line starters back. I know that group struggled last year. They were also pretty hurt. I think they'll be okay on defense, but I really do buy the offensive renaissance. I don't think they're going to be throwing for 400 yards a game, but they can be functional. I think they can be physical and effective and look a lot like some of Jimbo's best teams and a little bit of, 2010, 2011 Arkansas when Bobby was there. But I just think, there's too much invested in this. I know people make a lot of Jimbo's buyout. I don't think Jimbo thinks like that, or anybody really sort of is like, well, I don't have to really do anything because I got $75 million coming to me anyway. The coaches, most of them anyway, their minds just don't really work like that. They are both very invested in succeeding. And so while there is certainly, a gasoline and a vacuum situation here, I think that there's so much on the line for both of those guys that you kind of have to make it work. And I think they will.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think they'll find a way to make it work. And Jimbo is really competitive. Let's be honest. I mean, if he wasn't, we wouldn't have seen him go toe to toe with Nick Saban last May, and fiercely defend his team after Saban made some comments about roster.
What was it? Go ask God how he made the earth or something like that.
Go ask God how he did his deal. It was great. But yeah, to me, it's just about degrees of improvement. Is what I'm fascinated to watch. And I think that a week 2 game against Miami in Miami is going to be key. And week 4 and 5, Arkansas and Auburn are going to be really, really important for that program, because I think they're going to have to win those games to generate the kind of momentum that we're talking about.
Yeah, I think so. And Miami, another team that a lot of people are buying as a bounce back team. I'm not sure I'm fully in there. I like Mario Cristobal. I'm not sure about the personnel. We'll see. Sam, who is your first pick?
I'm going Wisconsin. I like the Badgers here for a few reasons. Number one, and I was listening to you guys talk about on the coaches show with Ari and Chris about some of the hires, and I just really love Wisconsin's move to go get Luke Fickell. I think, as Ari said, I think it's a sign that they're taking this seriously and they want to win at a high level. Because Paul Chryst, there were obviously some issues, but that he was able to take them, get them to some 10-win seasons and have some success there. But they struggled in the last year or two, and Wisconsin decided that it was time to take that program back up another level. And I think Fickell, when you see what he did at Cincinnati and the way he recruited, despite not having a team in a power conference, despite not having necessarily the resources that you would have at a Big Ten program. To be able to get them to the playoff, I think says a lot about his ability to acquire talent, to manage a program, to run a program. So I like that. I like the addition of Phil Longo as the offensive coordinator. He has seen him. He had success at North Carolina, had success at Ole Miss. He spent some time down here at Sam Houston State. Really, really good offensive mind. And then the combination of Longo and Tanner Mordecai, I really like. Mordecai was one of the best group of 5 quarterbacks last year. Definitely one of the best in the American Athletic. Really talented guy. And I think the marriage of Longo and Mordecai, I think, gives this offense a chance to really shine once they get it going. Because I think one thing that you'll see is you'll see that offense change quite a bit. It's going to be different from Wisconsin, what Wisconsin fans are usually accustomed to. But I think there's a lot of potential there. So I really do like the Badgers bouncing back from being 7-6 a year ago and making some noise in the Big Ten.
Yeah, go read our friend Jesse Temple's coverage of the Badgers. He does a great job with them. Always good, giving some behind the scenes stuff. I think Wisconsin is one of those programs that is really going to benefit from the expanded playoff, because there's a tough conversation about, okay, what is this program ceiling? Like, we know in any given year, Wisconsin could win the West. That side of the conference is so wide open always. Okay, well, now you bring in USC and UCLA. I have a hard time seeing Wisconsin being a lot better than USC when USC is not even rolling, but like competent, right? That's tough. You obviously have Ohio State and Michigan. It's tough to see Wisconsin getting past them. So you basically have to win the West, get through there with like one loss, which is never super easy, because there's, Wisconsin is who they were offensively. I think they can change that under Luke Fickell, and they will, while keeping some of that physicality. But like the idea of Wisconsin getting into the 14 playoff, if you told me that was impossible, I would be like, maybe. Like, you're probably right. But a 12-team playoff? I mean, most years Wisconsin can probably sniff that, right? They're always that really good program. And I think that's, if this was a 12-team playoff this year and you told me, Luke Fickell can get there in year one, that's not the craziest thing I've ever heard, And so Wisconsin they're in a really interesting spot. And I think they are one of the programs that stands to really benefit from the expanded playoff and the possibility of getting in there. I think that's a really realistic goal for them. Dare I say more years than not, especially under Luke Fickell, a guy who, did some really great things at Cincinnati. And, really, I think for a lot of people, he was the quote unquote, the guy who went 6-6 at Ohio State, and seeing him build in the way that he did at Cincinnati. And when he leaves, people are, crying in the streets. That says a lot about what you do, especially as a guy who didn't have a ton of connections to that program. So we'll see. Sam, my next one. I'm going to go keep it in the Big Ten. Math is a crazy thing, Sam. And so is competency. And at some point, the dam has to break for Nebraska. And I think you're going to see that this year. Listen, what does a bounce back mean? I'm not sure Tommy Frazier is walking through that door and we're going to see Nebraska competing for national championships. But listen, they ran Bo Pelini out of town because he couldn't get to double digits and kept losing 4 games. I think Nebraska can get back to that. Maybe not right away, but it's hard to believe. It's been, I believe, 6 years since they've been to a bowl game. That's insane at any power program. Like, that's hard to do at a place that really cares and really invests in football. And yet, that's something that Nebraska has done. Mike Riley, I think, won 9 games. I want to say 2017, and they haven't been to a bowl game since then. For all of Scott Frost, I mean, what were the betting odds when Scott Frost took that job that he would never have a winning season?
Golly, we were talking about that. All the grades were like A's and A+ for Scott Frost when he got hired.
Yeah, it's crazy. So, listen, we heard plenty from last year and really most of the Scott Frost tenure to suggest that it was not the best situation. There are a lot of game management issues that showed up on Saturday. The jokes were very funny, but when you lose so many close games, you upgrade the coaching staff. I think the roster is probably slightly better. I think you're going to be okay. And again, like we talked about with Wisconsin, you're in the Big Ten West. Like, it's not like you're sitting there in the SEC West where you got to play LSU, Alabama, Texas A&M, all these super, super talented teams. Like, you're going to be okay if you're competent and you don't beat yourself. Nebraska's been doing a lot of beating themselves the last couple of years. I think they can stop that under Matt Rule. And one of the hallmarks of his program is toughness. I think there's a toughness that he can instill immediately. And I think, from the Scott Frost era, like 120th in rush defense last year, that's black shirts. Come on, that's white flag. That's white flag stuff right there. I think, I'm not in love with the personnel at Nebraska. I think they got a long ways to go to build that up and to get where you can really start doing the things that Nebraska wants to do. And there's a fair debate about what the ceiling and what the realistic expectations should be in that program. But it should be better than what they've done the last, half decade. Certainly a lot better than that. And there's no excuse to be that bad. I mean, 6 losing seasons in a row is wild. I think that ends now.
3, 4, and 8 seasons, 2 3-win seasons, and a 5-win season.
It's hard to
That's
like
rough.
They have been bad, but they have not been like laughing stock bad, where you're just like, oh, this is a disaster. It seems like every year they've just been like, what's going on there? Why aren't they better than this? And it's hard to believe when you see it on paper. You're like, wow, they have been not good for a long time, because people think of them as an average program. They've been way below average, like since Bo left. And
2016,
it's crazy.
The 9-4 was the last time they had a winning record. I'll say this: I'm high on Nebraska too. When Ari and I did the buy or sell, I was definitely a buy on Nebraska, and more on, I think, on the long term because of Matt Rule's ability to build a program. What I will say about 2023 is this year is going to be fascinating to me with the Cornhuskers, because one thing that Matt Rule has done at his previous 2 college stops is he's had really rough first years. And it was I think Temple, I believe they went 2-10 that first year. And at Baylor, it was 1-11. And Matt is very much a rip it down to the studs and build back from the ground up kind of builder. So that said, things have changed since he's last been a college coach, because the one-time transfer rule came in. The portal has become a big mechanism for roster management. And
this is the best situation he's taken over by far.
100%.
Something.
100%. But because of that style and the way he builds, I'm curious, how much progress do we see this year? I do think there's going to be improvement. And I do think in the long term, this hire works out. And I think this was a great direction to go for the Cornhuskers. I think he'll do a great job rebuilding this program up. But watching it this year will be fascinating to me, just because of how it's happened in the previous 2 stops and just the way that he builds these things from the start. I think that the first year is always the toughest in a Matt Rule program. And
Matt Rule might be the only coach on the planet who has broken 2 programs' hearts by leaving, and they're still like, we love that guy. That's hard to do. We just talked about Bobby Petrino. That has not been his experience. He has gone out in many ways in a blaze of glory. And, Matt Rule, that I don't know how you do that. I think Matt Rule, obviously, a immensely likable person. I know I spent some time with him. Sam, you have as well. And maybe that's part of it, but it's hard to sort of leave, especially leaving when things are good and having people sort of be like, it's okay, we get it. Sam, who is your next pick?
I'm going to pick somebody that I think you have a little familiarity with and you like a little bit too. Arizona State. I really, and I'm also, Ari, I think, is a little bit on board here too, because he was leading the Hire Kenny Dillingham campaign for the Sun Devils. But I really do like the way they put this first staff together. I think Dillingham has a lot of potential. Obviously, I love that his ties there to Arizona State. But you look at some of the guys he's hired on that staff. I really liked when he brought in Rashad Samples and Brian Carrington, 2 guys who can help recruit at a really high level. Bo Baldwin, who had a really decorated history, I think, at Eastern Washington as quarterbacks coach. He even brought Jason Mons from Saguaro, the local high school, really, really accomplished coach at that level. So they've seemed to do a really good job. They've added a lot of people in this cycle, both from a recruiting standpoint and from a portal standpoint. So they've made that roster over quite a bit. And I just like the potential there. I think there's a lot of energy around that program. Dillingham seems to have endless energy and enthusiasm to recruit, which I think is huge and is going to help this program, because this program, I think, does have higher ceiling than it has been the last several years. And so I do like the potential there right now at Arizona State under Dillingham. I think the energy is right over there.
Yeah, I think the energy is a big part of that. But you know, at the end of the day, the roster I think will be an issue. Defensively, you know, can they get there? They have added some nice pieces. They picked up Jordan Tyson, you know, at receiver, one of the best Colorado players that had left off of last year's team, didn't really get that opportunity. I'm very intrigued. I was out there this spring. I'm very intrigued to see what Drew Pine can do. I think they've been, sort of cagey about the quarterback spot, but I'll be surprised if Drew Pine doesn't win that job. And I'll tell you, when I was out there, some Chase Daniel vibes from Mr. Drew Pine. I see some similarities there. Very accurate, very decisive, a little undersized. Certainly a very different background than Chase Daniel, but I like what I saw from him, and I think they've got the pieces. I think they can put some points up, which you're going to need to in the Pac-12 this year. But all of a sudden, there's a real recruiting battle in the state of Arizona in trying to get guys to, not leave. Now, pulling guys out of Arizona is going to be a lot tougher. Jed Fish has had some success there. I think Kenny Dillingham with that staff, and I think they're very involved. They're going to be spending a lot of time in Texas, obviously, with, you mentioned Rashad Samples and Brian Carrington, two guys that have a lot of respect and a lot of name recognition there. And they know that. And then obviously heavy Arizona staff, Sean Aguano on there. A guy that's made a ton of hay as a high school coach there, and then was the interim at Arizona State last year. So I agree with you. I think the staff is a huge strength there. The roster, you got a little ways to go, but I can see it. Sam, let's go all the way to the other side of the country for my next bounce back pick. We'll stay on the top of the alphabet. And we will go to the Fighting Hugh Freezes in Auburn. Listen, I get it.
Oh man,
it's an interesting situation. Will we? Can you avoid the self-sabotage that sort of ended what was a very promising run at Ole Miss? But at the end of the day, when you look at this Auburn program, right? I do believe in the weight of a situation like last year. The hot seat is one thing. I think sometimes teams can rally around that. But Harsin really took it to another level, and you saw that in the offseason. When it's every time the next loss, the coach might be out. That's very different than I think, your coach is on the hot seat. Everybody kind of knew, hey, we're counting down the days to a midseason firing. I think that weighs on a team. And I think some of the locker room stuff that spawned a lot of the reasons for Brian Harsin getting sideways with the power brokers at Auburn, I think some of that stuff was real. And then obviously the recruiting aspect, I think above all, is the biggest issue. But Auburn is still talented. I think people don't realize, Sam, this is still a team inside the blue chip ratio, number 16. Okay, a lot of questions, certainly. I'm not a huge fan of what they have at QB with Robbie Ashford and Peyton Thorne from Michigan State. But you still have Jarquez Hunter. You got the number 4 transfer class in the country. Jair Shorter, Shane Hooks, I think could be a nice 1-2 at receiver. They throw Caleb Burton in there from Ohio State late. You add Justin Rogers from Kentucky, DeMario Tolan from LSU, linebacker, Gunnar Britton. They pick up a Western Kentucky guy moving up. Listen, talent isn't a cure-all, but talent does win out more often than not. And I just think ultimately, when you think about the upgraded talent that they've had, you sort of lift the weight off the program. I think the ceiling for Auburn is kind of low, but I think going from 5 wins to like 8, maybe you sniff 9. I don't know. You're fortunate you don't have a Penn State this year that's going to beat you up at the start of the season. But Auburn, I see definitely some upside there to be finishing a little bit higher in the West than maybe people believe.
Yeah, I tell you what, I mean, the talent level is good. I mean, look, Auburn recruits at a high level. There's no doubt about that. And Hugh's experience in the SEC and track record, I think certainly there's a lot of other issues there, but from a pure football standpoint, I mean, the guy is a good football coach, and they were, like I said, this is a guy that was able to beat Alabama when he was at Ole Miss. He was able to lead them to a 10-win season. Every stop that he's been at, Arkansas State, Ole Miss, and Liberty, he's recorded a 10-win season. And I think there's something to be said for that. So I do think there is some potential there for this team. And just because of where they are and the way they can recruit, the level of talent they have, I don't think there's a lot of question in his actual football acumen. And I think there's definitely a lot of potential there for the Tigers.
And hey, now that you can sort of, it's much easier to draw in recruits with paychecks. That's not illegal. Say what you want about Hugh Freeze, but the talent level and the recruiting assessments, Greg Little, NFL player, AJ Brown, all pro, DK Metcalf, a guy that, speaks for himself, obviously. The Kimdiche, Robert Kimdiche, you add him in there. Who am I forgetting? I'm forgetting a couple big ones. I'm forgetting a few other guys from that Ole Miss class, but ultimately, he had a lot of success with transfers, or built up Malik Willis. We'll see if he can do that. Producer Cam, Laramie Tunsil is the one I'm forgetting. I think he was. I don't know where he actually ended up being drafted after the draft night fiasco. What was it?
The gas mask. Remember the gas mask?
It was a 1-2 punch. It was the gas mask, and then the "yes, I got paid."
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Which I don't think he was breaking a lot of news, but yeah, man, maybe don't say that on draft night. I don't even remember these circumstances. Kansas City dropped the 13th overall. If I recall, he was generally accepted as a top 5 pick, right? Either
top
way,
10, certainly, yeah.
Yeah, regardless, clearly a huge talent. You're still making a ton of money in the NFL. So, Hugh Freeze, I think people underrate the, can you get, they overrate, can you get this guy, and underrate the evaluation, fit, development. That's how you actually make hay in the league. You got to get guys. But if you can identify and then get them and then develop them and use them, I mean, there's not a lot of guys that are more proven than Hugh Freeze. So this is why I really thought, listen, there's a million reasons to not do it if you're Auburn. But when you do it, I sort of get it, because this is a results business. And Auburn, I think, can get some results, and I think they can do it pretty quickly under Hugh Freeze. Sam, who you got?
My third pick is Baylor. I think this is a chance to really take a step back up for this program. And let's not forget, in the last 10, 11 years, Baylor's won the Big 12 3 times. Mm-hmm. This is a good program. This is a program that ever since it was revived, it has maintained a fairly high level of play, save for a few years. Like I said, we talked about the Matt Rule year earlier. But overall, this has been a program that has been a real factor in the Big 12 for quite some time. And last year didn't go the way you thought it would. They ended up 6-7. But I look at a lot of the circumstances last year, and I see where there can be improvements. Number one, quarterback play obviously wasn't where it needed to be. Blake Shapen struggled a lot in his first full year as a starter. But also, I don't think that he was outfitted with enough talent around him. I think that they lost a lot at receiver last year. They've improved there. They added Keytron Jackson out of the portal. And then they added Jake Roberts as a tight end from North Texas. They added Dominic Richardson to the run game to help beef up at running back. So they've outfitted the skill positions a little bit better around Shapen. They also brought in competition for him, Sawyer Robertson. Now Shapen's going to be the starter, but if for whatever reason Shapen struggles and they need to make a change, Sawyer Robertson's a talented guy. He was a 4-star coming out of Lubbock, Texas, played and signed for Mike Leach. And then, of course, transferred this offseason. So going and seeing Sawyer, I think he's a really talented guy. So I think they've got 2 talented quarterbacks there. And then you've got a team that, let's not forget, last year, going into the second week of November, they were 6-3, and they were still in the hunt to make a Big 12 championship game. Had they won out at the last 3 games of the season, they would have ended up playing for Big 12 championship. Of course, they went the other way. They lost 3 in a row. One of those, a very wild fire drill field goal at the last second to lose to TCU at home. They went toe-to-toe with TCU, and they outplayed TCU for a good chunk of that game. So this was not a bad team. I think they caught some bad breaks down the stretch and certainly lost their way a little bit. But I think you can attribute some of that to just the roster turnover that they had. They lost 6 draft picks off that 2022 team. And, they were playing, I think, with so many new guys in key roles in 2023 that it was hard to deal with. So I look at some of the experience that's been gained there. I like the addition of Matt Pallage as defensive coordinator, brings some familiarity back from that 2021 team that won the Big 12. And I think Dave Aranda, I am a believer in Dave Aranda. I do think he's got this program going in the right direction. So I think Baylor is a team that can bounce back from going 6-7 last year.
I think the thing that people overlook with Baylor too, is you mentioned, 3 Big 12 championships since 2010, 11, something in that range. 3 head coaches have won those championships. Like, I think people really underrate Baylor as a job because their history is so, we'll call it modest.
That's putting it politely.
Yeah, but I think Baylor is a testament to, like, hey, if the investment is there and the money is there, then you can do some things. And Baylor has invested in facilities and coaches, and they have made themselves into a very good job. And anybody who's been to that stadium and been to their facilities, like, you're in a good spot, and you're obviously in Central Texas where you have access to talent. And even though Waco itself is not Austin in terms of a draw, you are an hour and a half from Dallas, an hour and a half from Austin, and if you're from Texas, especially if you're in that I-35 corridor, a lot of your parents are gonna be able to come see your games for the most part, and that matters. And they've upped their recruiting. That started obviously under Art Briles, and you can pretty consistently get top 30 classes at Baylor, and certainly in the top 15 if you really get things rolling. We don't need to debate the quality of the jobs in the new Big 12, but certainly Baylor, if you wanted to make a case for number 1, number 2, you probably could, right? And so I think that means something, and I think it also means a lot when you're looking at, hey, we like Dave Aranda, we don't want to lose, we don't want to lose him. I think it. People the LSU thing people always talk about, but I don't think it doesn't seem like Brian Kelly's going anywhere for quite some time. I think you can feel pretty good about, hey, we can keep him for a little while. We'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see.
I don't think he's going to go anywhere. And I will say this: I do think they need to bounce back, because I think this is a huge year for him. I don't think he's under any pressure, so to speak. But if you don't take a step forward this year, then I think people start asking questions about how good are you really, because you won that Big 12 championship with a roster largely recruited by your predecessor. All those draft picks that they had were all Matt Rule recruits. So, and in the 6 draft picks they had in the 2021 team that got drafted in 2022. And so you had the rough first year, which pandemic year, you kind of watched that. Year 2, everything went right. Year 3, very up and down early, and then bottom kind of fell out at the end with that 4-game losing streak. So that's why I think this is such a pivotal year. There's been a lot of staff turnover. I love the Jeff Grimes hire when he made it. That one's worked out really well. I think the offensive staff has come
right time, right guy, right place.
Yeah. Yeah. And they've got Eric Mateos on the offensive line, who's done really good. AJ Stewart, who they just brought over, who had been at Oregon State, and Rice had been at BYU with Grimes and Mateos. So I think that is going to help that staff a little bit too. But he fired, Dave Aranda fired his mentor, Ron Roberts, after last season. And granted, they were not very good, but he's now changed out both coordinators and, of course, brought back Matt Powledge from Oregon. So this is a really important year, I think, in terms of just steering the direction and figuring out what this program truly is under Dave Aranda. But I do, me personally, I'm a believer, and I do think they're gonna get it done, and they're gonna get moving back in the right direction.
Well, Sam, we were just gonna do 6, but you know what? I have too much respect for our listeners. We need a bonus round. All right, we're not gonna go quite as deep into these, but we have some bonus bounce back teams. You hit on Arizona State. I like them long term. I'm a little iffy on them short term, but we'll see. And they coming back from 3-9, I think you can certainly get to a bowl game. But what about 90 minutes down the road, Arizona? I think it's really tough to bring in a ton of new faces and have it gel immediately. But last year, you bring in Jaden DeLora, you throw into Jacob Cowing, you have a breakout in Tairoa McMillan. I think I got that right. But they were a lot better. I think this year that team can get to a bowl game. I think there's a lot of juice in the program. You have a nice 1-2 punch, in the backfield, Michael Wiley and Jonah Coleman, and a lot of juice in the program. And you just add Damon Williams, Elijah Rushing comes in there, 2 of the best players in the state, already in the boat for the class of 2024. They sort of have already declared war on Arizona State on the recruiting trail, which, those 2, they've been somewhat of an afterthought for a long time. You know, we can call it the Bijan Robinson disease. We can call it whatever we want to. It's been a problem. But there's so much talent there, and for whatever reason, it's been very tough to keep guys home. And I think that changes. You can have some stuff, but you know, I think the defense, if you can improve to like not terrible, I think you can really do some things at Arizona. But you know, you only have 3 starters back. That's an uphill battle for Johnny Nansen, the defensive coordinator there. But I like Arizona to get to a bowl game, maybe win that 7 game. You know, get to 7 games, something along those lines. So bounce back. We'll call it a continuation of a program that was at rock bottom when Jed Fish got there. So props to him. Who's on your bonus picks here, Sam?
Miami. I'm going to go Miami, even though for a couple of reasons. One, I don't know they can get much worse than they did last year. Like last year was, you know, you're losing to Middle Tennessee. It was bad, but I do think Mario Cristobal, you know, with his history there and his familiarity there and the way they've been able to acquire talent, I think at some point that's going to add up. And I just look at the schedule this year, and I think the schedule is very manageable. It's very that Texas A&M game in week 2 looms large. Would be really nice to win that game. But even if you don't, you probably are starting your non-conference 3-1 coming out of September. You get the off week, and then you get Georgia Tech. So you could be going into that road game at North Carolina at 4-1. If you get some momentum going, maybe even 5-0 if you beat A&M. If you get some momentum going there, then things could possibly get rolling for Miami. So I think the Canes are going to, just from a talent acquisition standpoint, the way the schedule sets up early on, I think Cristobal's got a chance to get them to bounce back in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. I got to go. I'm going to keep it in the South and say Florida Atlantic. Not far from your boys in Miami.
Tom Herman. Fighting Tom Herman.
You've had plenty of experience with him. I think people forget this team has had 3 losing seasons. Well, 2 losing seasons in a row. Willie Taggart, I think, went 5-4 in the COVID year. But ultimately, I think Tom Herman, we've seen him sort of have microwaved teams and looked good. What, you know, in the Sun Belt, you can win a lot of games. I think ultimately, you know, it's a little bit different. You know, when you move up and you know, you're dealing with the CUSA is still. You know, I don't think it's quite like the Sun Belt where you've seen, or Sun Belt or the MAC, where different teams can succeed. But I think certainly in the CUSA, you know, FAU has a chance to really win a bunch of ball games. At least get back to a bowl game. You know, 8 wins, 9 wins. I think it's possible, because I don't think the talent gaps are that wide down there. And if you can scheme it up, and I think you've got a hungry Tom Herman down there, I'm a believer that they can flip a switch and have some success. What else you got for us, Sam?
And the last team I'm going to throw out here is Rice. This is kind of, I'm taking a flyer here on the Owls. JT Daniels is there now on his 4th program, went from USC to Georgia to West Virginia, now at Rice. The buzz coming out of there with the fit that he is in this offense at Rice, him and Luke McCaffrey, the Nebraska transfer, who's a dynamite receiver. I think they got a lot of skill talent, and they were a team that I thought should have gone to a bowl game last year. They ended up 5-8. They did end up going to a bowl game because they were one enough 6-win teams, but they didn't get bowl eligible technically. I think this is a team that might have a shot to do it, just because they've had so many problems at quarterback. They've had so much turnover because of injuries or inconsistency or other issues at the position. And I think JT could come in and give them somebody who's competent, somebody who's accurate, somebody who can be consistent at that spot and help Rice finally get back to a bowl game, which they haven't done in the Mike Bloomgren era, back even in until I think it was 2014, 2015 was the last time they were at bowl game. So I think the Owls
Are they the only 5-8 team in history? There can't be very many of them.
I think North Texas went 5-8. I think 3, 4, 5 years ago. There was a year where they went.
That's our next podcast episode. Is we do a deep dive on all the 5-8 teams in the history of college football. That's a dynamite show, I feel like. And we start with 2022 Rice. I like it. Sam, we should probably touch on Michigan State before we head out. A lot of people pointing to the Spartans as a bounce back team. I need to see some more. Well, I mean, I think how much of year one is Kenneth Walker, right? And I think you see Peyton Thorne not really improving. That makes me nervous. So you got Noah Kim now stepping in there. It feels like a bit of a low ceiling, and I wonder too, when the pressure of the contract, which is loomed over the program, obviously, how much does that sort of affect anything? Where you feel like, hey, we got to win now, and sort of still, you don't want to live in the portal, obviously, but when you have so much success in year one of the portal, and you have a lot more success than people expect, you sort of raise the bar for yourself in a way that can be counterproductive to long-term growth. And so you look at that, not the best schedule for them either. You still have Washington, even though you're in East Lansing. You go to Iowa, you go to Minnesota. Obviously, you're not going to be able to dodge Ohio State and Penn State. I'm not sure it matters where those games are. I don't think you're in a place right now to compete with either of those teams. I think they might be able to get back to a bowl game, but not by a lot. I don't know that you're going to have a replay of the Washington game last year where you just get run off the field, but I don't think you win that game. I'm pretty high on Washington this year. So I'm not as in on Michigan State as a bounce back team. I think they can be better, but not a team that a lot of people are going to be fired up about. So we'll see. We'll see, I guess. We started the show talking about you have some entrenched beliefs that can change in a hurry. I think last year it was, well, Michael Penix is too banged up to be effective, and Washington's offense is going to take time to fix. Or Washington's offense is going to take time to fix. That was not the case. So maybe we're wrong, but we'll see. I doubt it. I haven't been wrong before. Maybe we'll see the first time, but I don't think so. I don't think so. And listen, Sam, if I'm wrong, I can just double down. It's fine. I'm good with it. I have no problems doing that. But thank you guys for listening. I hope that you will bounce back into the Until Saturday feed for our next show. Again, follow us on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. Leave us a thumbs up. Subscribe on YouTube as well. Leave us a review, comment. We'll try to hit those in a mailbag episode in the future. So thank you guys again for tuning in. And we'll be back very, very soon. We've got a show every weekday leading up to the season. And then, of course, we got a ton of stuff for you this season. You'll see me. You'll see Sam. You'll see a lot of my colleague, Ari Wasserman. Maybe the most polarizing member of our staff. I love Ari. I'm sure many of you do too. And so I'm looking forward to it. Again, for Sam Khan, I'm David Ubben.